Back. We are joined today by Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst, to discuss what is happening now in the war against Iran. So thank you for coming back on the program.
Turn on, you get that light shining in the corner. I just checked into a hotel on the road.
Well, I'm not sure where to start here because there's so many times we've heard Trump, after every bomb raid, he essentially comes out and say, well, this time we're very close to a deal. We heard this story many, many times, only to see him beat the drums of war again the next day. But this appears to be something different, though. We hear from the Iranians as well that there is big movements, not a deal, but at least an agreement on a shared understanding and a plan to move forward. Given how far apart the sides are, this is quite remarkable. So I was wondering, what is going on? What does this mean? I'm
fully empathetic with how you're feeling. I was on Garland Nixon's podcast yesterday. I put on a neck brace. You know, the things that people, when they have whiplash from a car accident, I put one of those on because it was symbolic of what we're going through. One moment, Trump says he's going to, quote, bomb the shit out of Iran. And then the next moment, he's like, hey, all we're saying is give peace a chance. You know, he goes from being Dr. Strangelove to becoming John Lennon. And this process has been shepherded by Pakistan. They've been at the center of it, and the information that Pepe and Ike were given, it's turning to track to prove to be true. The Pakistanis the other day were talking about walking away, but they didn't. Qatar got involved, so it looks like what they have produced is based on those 14-point document that Iran introduced back on April 8th, that they've come up with a memorandum of understanding, so how they're going to work this. It doesn't mean that they've actually got agreements on each of the issues, but apparently one of the key acts of good faith has been carried out by the United Arab Emirates, who turned over reportedly $3 billion the other day. You know, I when I heard first of that report, I was skeptical, but there's another report out now saying they're going to turn over like a total of $20 billion, and this $3 billion was the first of that tranche. So Iran is they're seeing some money, because one of their red line demands was you've got to have unfreeze the assets. The other their other four more, fundamental demands that they absolutely insist on: the lifting of the sanctions, the recognition of Iran's control or sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, lift the blockade by the United States, and a permanent ceasefire in Lebanon. Get the Israeli troops out and actually withdraw the Israeli forces from Gaza as well. So there's no sign that Iran's backed off of that. It's just now a question of at what point in the process does that come to the forefront.
Yeah, well, I saw from the Iranian side, that is Aragci, he came out as well and was making the point that the memorandum of understanding will put this out in different steps. That is, first step, we'll do this. Once it has been achieved, we'll move to the next step. But so the first step apparently would be, they signed this memorandum of understanding, and once it's signed, all of Iran's assets will be released, and they will not be frozen again. This is kind of the deal, and once this is done, they can move on to the next step. So this is quite significant. It's releasing the sanctions. It's not the most difficult thing to do compared to the other tasks, but it is a show of goodwill, though, because it's been so many nonsense negotiations, and also once you get this out of the way, it's gonna essentially be a cost for the U.S. as well to go back on what is promised. So it's a good first move, but what are the other things that have to be included into this deal, though?
Well, again, lifting all the sanctions, not just oil. So part of what one of the initial gestures will be lifting sanctions on oil. That benefits Trump as well. Helps get some more oil out of in the market, but ultimately get all of the sanctions lifted, lift the U.S. blockade, and then I think the real stumbling block is going to be Israel. Israel's going to have to leave Lebanon and leave Gaza. Now, if left up to them, they are not going to do it. But Trump has the leverage in terms of saying, okay, we're going to cut off all aid to you, and you're going to be on your own. That will motivate Israel to come around. But I candidly don't think Trump's willing to play that hard with them. I think Trump is, will lose his spine. But hey, I'm prepared to be surprised and very much mistaken on that. So the other issues with respect to the nuclear side, that's for down the road. Now, Israel's complaining that this doesn't begin to address the ballistic missiles. And candidly, I don't think Iran's going to allow ballistic missiles to even be put on the agenda, because apart from controlling the Strait of Hormuz, that's their other ace in the hole, or their other trump card, so to speak.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, on the Strait of Hormuz, I saw Arakci make the point that, while Iran may not he said levying tolls would not be acceptable, but he said we reserve the right to charge for services, given that it's not international waters. It's all the Strait of Hormuz falls within either Iran or Oman's national waters.
Correct.
On the nuclear deal, though, I mean, once Trump begins to make the point that we'll get a deal so Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, this introduces some optimism for me, because if he starts to frame the conflict as preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, then a deal can be made, because Iran's made it clear it doesn't need a nuclear weapon. So at least in that area there's some flexibility. So if Trump wants to claim victory, this is essentially what he wants to gamble on, because if he sets the goal of opening, having the Strait of Hormuz act as treated as if it's international waters, then he can't have a victory. My concern, though, is what you hinted towards there, though, which is the ceasefire in Lebanon and Gaza. That is, that has to be included into the ceasefire. Well, I'm assuming that Israel will do everything in its power to disrupt this peace negotiation. So, if
Clint, are you a cynic?
Slightly so, yeah. But this isn't the courtyard. Well, this isn't for the Israelis, though. I mean, Lebanon, Gaza, by having this in the deal, they can essentially veto it anytime they want by massacring people there.
Or don't forget false flags. So Israel would carry out something to make it look like Iran violated the agreement, that Iran attacked one of its neighbors. It's been fascinating this week watching Iranian restraint. Yet, I don't know if you've picked this up, but I think it was on the Tuesday or Wednesday strikes by the United States that we saw the first evidence of Iran's upgraded air defense system. Because it reported they took down 5 Tomahawk missiles during the strike on Bandar Abbas. They hadn't done that before. And they also engaged an I think it was an F-16, again, with the ground, the air defense system lit it up, F-16 knew it was going to be engaged, and it bailed out real quick. So that's clear assistance from China and Russia that have upgraded them on that. Then the targeting, their retaliatory strikes, they were not massive, but they were incredibly precise. And I know, and I have some information with respect to one of those, that it was extremely damaging to U.S. I'll call it U.S. strategic capabilities. In other words, the U.S. ability to, if they were launching intercontinental ballistic missiles, that my understanding is whatever was taken out in Bahrain was a critical, uber expensive component. And the feeling I know on the U.S. side was the only way that could have been targeted was with Chinese and Russian assistance. Similarly, on this very last strike, they hit another radar that was in Bahrain and took it out. So then they were hitting precise targets at the Mawafaq al-Salti air base in Jordan and reportedly damaged F-35s, F-15s, and F-16s, as well as maybe an E-8 Prowler. So, Iran's got to be feeling a little more confident from a military standpoint that they were not just getting beat up with no response. And what I'm seeing right now, we're not seeing any of the signature activities you would expect to see from the United States militarily if they were planning additional airstrikes. So, right now we're at, let's see, going to be 5 o'clock here. So that's, so it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:30 in the morning over in Iran. And usually this is the time when U.S. military strikes are lighting off, and we're not seeing anything. So that says that in fact, these talks, they are real, and the negotiations are genuine. They're not just a facade. Now, whether they can hold up, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, well, I know skeptics, and I would put myself in that category.
Me too.
Well, my skepticism is on the idea that Trump wants an end to the war. I mean, I think the deception is in the past is because they want to defeat the Iranians. They don't want to have a peace agreement and live side by side. But they must be sinking in that they can't achieve their objectives. They can't defeat the Iranians, and the longer they have this thing dragging on, the more pain Iran's going to bring to them. So yeah, why wait until the bitter end? It looks as if, well, again, it could be that this is this realization that they have to throw in the towel. But what do you make of the strikes they had, though? Because when the Iranians had the retaliatory strikes, they appeared to focus on Bahrain, on Jordan, and Kuwait.
Yeah,
I kind of had assumed that any retaliatory strike would prioritize the United Arab Emirates for destruction. But you think this is linked up to the deal, given that they just handed over a few billions? I mean, is this one of the steps the Iranians showing that they will cease all hostilities if they, show some reciprocity?
Yeah. I mean, UAE is like, they're like the most obnoxious relative at the table. You want to punch them in the face. They have been consistently siding with Israel until recently, and they were quick to come out and condemn Iran for retaliating for having been attacked. However, Monday, that delegation from the UAE went to Tehran. And I think, for the UAE, it's an economic calculation. They've really taken a beating in the course of this war. We're now 105 days old, 106 days old. They've suffered significant economic damage and are looking to get back into business. They've got that free trade zone, Jebel Ali, that has just been shut down, dead for the entire duration of this war. So reportedly, they're playing a critical role in returning some of the frozen assets. The day after, so they went Monday. So the next day, Tuesday, the Qatari delegation shows up and they stay. And many thought that they would leave, Tuesday afternoon. And as soon as they left, then the United States would start up the attack again. But apparently they stuck around. They stayed overnight. So they were there during one of the attacks. Even they didn't really hit Tehran, but it was close. And so Qatar apparently played a role with the Pakistanis in working out a document that they could all agree to. Now, the other thing that's going on behind the scenes that Pepe and I, Escobar and I have been told, and I believe it's true, is that Pakistan is also negotiating with Qatar and Saudi Arabia and helping them plan their escape from being under the control of the United States, or separating themselves from being a host for U.S. military personnel. And that is an interesting, in the 14-point document that Iran presented to the United States, one of the points was that the United States withdraw its military personnel from around Iran. And whether they'll get that or not remains to be seen, but we have seen reluctance, let's call it no enthusiasm on the part of the Saudis or Qataris to allow their bases to be used by the United States, but specifically they're not allowing Israel to overfly their territory at all. So that's put some, I guess, brakes on what the Israelis could do in terms of engaging militarily. So this is a pretty complex diplomatic effort, and Pakistan's not doing this on its own. Pakistan is doing it with the full support, encouragement. China is the principal, but Russia is the secondary. So this actually comes down to broader constructing a BRICS order, a new international economic order that's going to be free of Western pressure and sanctions. Like Scott Bessey can threaten, we're gonna seize your dollars, and all Iran's going to say is, well, we're selling our oil in yuan, so screw your dollars.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, what will the region look like after this war? Again, we're delving into speculation. We don't know what's exactly is in this memorandum of understanding. We don't know the different steps, if they will be followed. But we do know that what is important for the Iranians. I mean, if they are willing to not cede the Strait of Hormuz, but if they're willing to show some flexibility, then for me it indicates that at least then perhaps the Gulf states have made some commitments to perhaps limit the presence of U.S. troops, because the whole purpose for the Iranians is to holding on to Strait of Hormuz is an instrument to decouple the U.S. a bit from the region. So this objective will stand, but I mean,
well, let me ask you, what areas do you think they might be flexible on?
The toll, how much you would charge on ships going through. I think all of this, I think it's a means to an end, and the end would be to have a tool to encourage the countries of the region to remove sanctions and to expel U.S. bases as a favorable terms for access. If they go along with this,
hello. Oh, you're back.
Yeah,
I see you moving. Okay, you froze up there momentarily.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was you or me.
Could be at my end. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, you were saying.
No. Yes, I was saying. Well, I was saying. I assume that if they're willing to be less strict on what they charge going through the Strait of Hormuz, how they're gonna run it, essentially, it's because they're getting other guarantees that the U.S. will well, reduce their presence. I'm just thinking, how do you see the region forming though after this war? Because a lot of things have changed. Iran extended its security guarantees to, or it's extended deterrence to Lebanon. We see, the U.S. would be out of its mind to try to attack Iran again. This has been a very painful experience. But how much do you think Iran's position in the region will change as a result of this?
Well, actually, I think Iran would be a bit of a moderating influence. I mean, let's be candid about the Gulf Arabs. They're like a bunch of nasty high school girls. There's that movie, The Mean Girls. So, okay, 7 years ago, you got Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. They're mad at Qatar. Oh, and they tried to impose an embargo. Why? Because Qatar was having relations with Turkey and was supporting Hamas. Okay, then let's jump 2 years ago. Now, all of a sudden, it's the Saudis mad at the Emiratis and threatening to go to war. And then it's just, they've had these so-called Gulf Arabs are not united at all. I mean, they've been getting pissed off at each other over just some of the most ridiculous things. And the irony was, when the Saudis and Emiratis were going after Qatar, who was the one country that came to the aid of Qatar? Iran. So Iran has been careful on its diplomatic efforts, and I think with strong encouragement from both Russia and China. So it was now 2 years ago, maybe 3, that Saudi Arabia and Tehran, basically, they repaired, because, I mean, they had been at odds. They'd been fighting a proxy war in Yemen with, Iran backing the Houthis and Saudis backing the government, the regular government. But anyway, they bridged that gap. So they settled that difference. And what Pakistan is also doing with the encouragement of China, we can't ignore China is the hidden. I don't want to call them the puppet master here, but they're talking to Egypt, Turkey, the Saudis, Iran, and with Pakistan forming a new military, if you will, a NATO style organization for that region. And this becomes, it's gotten especially interesting this week with Israel's verbal attacks and threats on Turkey and getting in a proverbial old pissing match with Erdogan. And, the only one who's got as big an ego as Donald Trump is Erdogan. And so, he didn't take kindly to that. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out, what are these Israelis thinking? This guy controls a major source of their oil. He could cut it off in a heartbeat, and instead they're threatening them that we're going to attack you and destroy you. I'm color me surprised. So that's where I think that this proposal from China through Pakistan that these countries come together to form a defensive alliance against Israel is something that's starting to resonate. So I think we could see that, and that's going to and Israel's position will be, at least from the standpoint of public support in the United States, will be much more vulnerable. They're not going to have the reflexive support, and even if they succeed in getting themselves completely insinuated into the National Defense Authorization Act, the Section 224 and Section 622, they're trying to basically, like a tick or a parasite, embed themselves in the hosts so that they'll never be subject to any kind of political controversy coming down the line. So I see the military effort increase among those countries, as well as levels of economic cooperation. I mean, frankly, Qatar's got some years of rebuilding to do ahead of itself because of the damage it suffered early on in this war. I'm not sure how much physical damage Saudis have took or encompassed. Bahrain will probably become part of Iran again, and Kuwait could see it get folded back into Iraq. So there'll be some changes, I think.
Yeah, I've been looking at Kuwait as well. Its continued independence is highly questionable. Questionable. Well, one of the reasons we don't know too much about this memorandum of understanding and the possible deal that will follow is there's been encouragement, to keep the media quiet. And I was wondering, how do you read this? Is this for people not to oversell the story or have in order to essentially create the wrong expectations to sabotage it? I mean, it looks like this. The concern for sabotage is on all sides, to be honest, because one often looks at the American side. It's many who do not want this deal. The Israelis are obviously also eager to sabotage, but also within Iran, you have the hawks. Many hawks who also say, well, for good reason, they are in a strong position now. This is the time to, put an end to their enemies, not to accept a deal. And of course, you can understand why they would be hesitant to make any deals after everything that's happened. But anyways, my point is at all sides, you find some saboteurs. Is this why there's so much secrecy in the media?
Yeah, no, I think the particularly on the Trump side of the house, they are trying to prevent a further firestorm. There was all the social media influencers that are paid for by the Israeli government. They went on starting Sunday. Boy, they went on a blistering attack on Trump, and he was getting phone calls from people like Lindsey Graham and then Sheldon Adelson's widow. He succumbs to that pressure. But I think right now he's also another element. I meant to mention this earlier, is the oil company executives reportedly went in to brief Trump, and they said, "Oh my God, this is going to be terrible." The headline was they're desperately trying to warn the White House about major fuel disruption that is imminent. And this official, again, refused to be named out of fear of retaliation. But this is the potential for real economic chaos in the United States is scaring Trump as well. And so he's caught between, okay, if he gets this war, gets at least some sort of peace in place with Iran, and can take credit for saying, hey, Iran's promised they're not going to have a nuke, which that's been Iran's position all along, then he can take a victory lap with that without people pointing out, you got something that's weaker than JCPOA, but okay, you got take it as a victory. So he can then try to get the world, it's not just oil, it's the liquid natural gas, urea, and sulfur and helium, get all of that back into some sort of order, hoping they can restore it. And it's going to take minimum of 3 months and maybe much longer if they actually get an agreement within the next 3 or 4 days that endures. But you're correct, Glenn. I've already seen headlines about Republican senators or criticizing Trump for what they're reading is the nature of the agreement, and then they're going to be calling the White House and say, "What the hell are you thinking? What are you trying to do?" So this is remains to be seen if Trump can put up with this kind of pressure. That's why I think ultimately the deal is going to collapse, because I don't see Trump having the stamina or the strength to resist the intense domestic pressure that's going to come from the Zionist lobby.
Well, the Iranian foreign minister Arakci was making the point that the media should not speculate what's in this deal, because that's essentially could be a pathway towards derailing it. He could have added, but I'm glad he didn't, that keep Trump away from the media as well, because every time he's in the media, he has to sell the strongman image. So he has to go through the same talking points. That is, the Iran is begging for a deal, we're dictating the terms. they're going to get not a dollar of the frozen assets. They will give up all nuclear material. The Strait of Hormuz will be open. Our ships are going. Once you start locking yourself into this maximalist position, it's very difficult to essentially commit to a memorandum of understanding, which compared to the previous statements of Trump, this would be reality catching up. This would seem like a capitulation so I think, keep Trump away from the media and at least get the ball rolling. If they can get into that one step of releasing the Iranian funds, then, it would be very painful for the U.S. to step back and then lose what it's already put into this deal. So, but I had the same thought as you. I assume that it will fall apart at some point, but I really hope I'm mistaken though. But what do you think is going to crack first?
I think it's going to crack on Israel. Israel will refuse to leave Lebanon, and Trump will refuse to use the leverage he has to force them out. We had the experience with Ronald Reagan back in 1982, and Sharon was the general. He was rampaging in southern Lebanon. And I think Netanyahu was I may be mistaken on that, but whoever the Israeli prime minister was at the time, Reagan called him up and said, get the hell out or else we're cutting you off. And they left. So there is precedent for this. And Eisenhower did it to the Brits and the Israelis back during the Suez crisis. Was that 53, 54? So there's precedent for it. It's just a matter of, is Trump willing to do that? Now, according to Robert Barnes, they had a session a week and a half ago at the White House with a pollster, Rich Barris, who's an outstanding pollster. And he basically told Trump, he said, look, the majority of the American public is looking at you like you are Bibi Netanyahu's prison paramour, that you're basically his bitch, was how he put it. And, Trump recoiled at that. I'm not going to be anybody's bitch. Okay, so prove it now. And the orders that will be given to Israel is pull out now, get back inside your borders. Now, the opposite side of that is the Hezbollah then has to end its attacks, but I think that they will do so because as part of this broader peace deal and in support of Iran. So this thing it's not impossible, but boy, there are a lot of pitfalls in the way and booby traps that could derail this very quickly.
Well, it's just overall the Trump presidency. It looks like it's in a difficult spot though, because again he was elected on making America great again in terms of putting an end to some of the mistakes of the past decades. There's this forever wars. Then he walked away from the no wars and by essentially saying that through the strongman would essentially with great strength restore the dominant position of the United States. So pump up the military budgets, defeat its enemies. And then of course he lost a lot of his supporters. But now, I mean, for him, who's now positioned himself as the strongman who would defeat America's enemies, now he has to make very painful concessions. And I think this is what the US does need now, though, because it's not easy to climb down from that position, though, of the only world superpower and now having to accept essentially a defeat to countries like Iran and accept a diminished position in the world. It's it must be difficult. I'm just it's hard to I just can't see it going through though.
Well, look, the problem, Glenn, is the United States has been in denial now for, let's call it 4 years. So let's go back to the start of the special military operation in Ukraine. So from the outset, that was a proxy war with Russia, using Ukraine as the stand-in. And the United States brought intelligence. It brought, weapons. Started with HIMARS and ATACMS and F-16s, and they're trying to resupply 152 or 155 millimeter artillery shells. And what happened? The United States failed to move the needle against Russia. Russia steadily beat down Ukraine. Then we come to Operation Prosperity Guardian. And again, this is not just on Trump. Remember, Operation Prosperity Guardian started in December of 2023 with under Joe Biden, that they were going to open up and establish freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. And, for, 12, 13, about 15 months, they failed. And so Donald Trump comes into the picture in month 13 or 14. And so January, February, start of March, they announced, by God, we're going to show those Houthis now who's boss. We're not going to be a bunch of wimps like the Biden administration. And so they they ultimately had 2 aircraft carriers in the Red Sea. Then we're actively bombing Houthi positions. And whereas in the previous 13 months, the Houthis were shooting down an average of 1 MQ-9 Reaper drone, they now started shooting down 1 of those a week. So from once a month to 1 a week. And just the base price of the airframe of that is $35 million. When you attach the optical pod, the pods for, recording video and firing Hellfire missiles and other things to it, that pushes the cost of it up to a minimum of like $60 million a piece. So what did the Houthis do? They destroyed 25 of those, 7 of them in the 7 weeks that Trump hung in there, which is, that's almost $2.4 billion dollars. So it's a lot of money, and Trump ended up declaring, "Oh, they've capitulated. We're out." So it's not just, and now here with this war with Iran, we're seeing a consistent theme that there are clear limits to U.S. military power. It is not this behemoth, this Goliath that cannot be defeated. It's a Goliath with feet of clay, among other things, and it's not just on the effectiveness of the weaponry. I mean, we've seen with the Patriot missiles, and it's supposed to defeat all of these ballistic missiles, and instead, the United States has only produced 6,000, roughly now 6,500, assuming they've been able to maintain the production through the first 5 months of this year. Well, when you realize that you have to fire 2 of those to take down 1 ballistic missile, that means if you got 6,500, or let's say 6,400 to make it easy, that means you can shoot down 3,200 missiles. Well, for heaven's sakes, Russia had fired in the course of the war with Ukraine, has fired over 14,000 missiles. And the number that Iran has fired against Israel is probably up well in the range of 3,000. So right there, the United States if they had actually employed all of those assets against that, they would have exhausted it. And then to top it off, when it comes time to make it, they're extremely expensive. The Patriot, the PAC-3 goes between $4 and $6 million. And then to add to the difficulties, the supply chain for it comes out of China. The Tomahawk cruise missile, for example, requires 18 different rare earth minerals, plus that comes out of China, plus tungsten. And so the United States has this offensive weapon that's basically dependent upon supply chains from China and Russia. So you put all that together and you're going, you know what? Maybe the United States is not a superpower as we thought.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard to argue that the US didn't overextend itself. But this is my point. I think it would be, the best thing for the US to also scale back a bit, prioritize what it wants to do. Because at the moment, attempting to do everything is just, terrible, terrible plan. But let me just ask a last question. How do you see if we're moving? If let's say this memorandum of understanding goes through with the Iranians, or if it doesn't, we're looking to our Iranian victory probably anyways. How does this change the wider world, do you think? I mean, how would the position of China or Russia be impacted by this?
Yeah, no, it'll boost their prestige. B, it's going to, for China, China still has it's taken the biggest hit of the BRICS countries from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, in part because it had actually invested in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, so it's going to want to recover some of that money. But this will be, it's going to be, I think, touch and go for at least 2 weeks, because we haven't got the details of this process, but it's going to hinge on continued meetings, continued diplomacy, and as you recall, the JPCOA, that took 18 months, almost 2 years to negotiate. So we could actually find ourselves in this whole negotiation process. And the good news there is they're going to not be shooting at each other. And that will, and I think right now that will reduce the risk in the Strait of Hormuz, because the only way you can fully open the Strait of Hormuz is for Iran to say, okay, it's open. We're not going to be shooting at any ships. They do have to pay the toll or the user's fee, but we're not going to be shooting. And that at that point, then the insurance companies would say, okay, good. We can go back in there. We don't have to worry about getting hit. But there's no way it can be open militarily. That was the lesson that's been demonstrated over the last 2 weeks with all these different air attacks by the United States. So if they get into the negotiation track, but as you've noted, and I agree with you, the potential for the Zionist lobby in particular, both from Israel's standpoint and then within the United States, from both the Christian Zionists, the Jewish Zionists, will put an enormous pressure on Trump to back out of this deal and then go back to war.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm hoping. The first step of releasing that Iranian funds will essentially be the sunk cost, something that incentivizes them to actually stick with this. But
yeah,
I don't know. I'm to summarize, cautiously optimistic. I mean, this is the best sign I've seen since February. I think that it actually could come to an end. But not convinced just yet. Anyways, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
There's the old saying about third time is the charm, except Donald Trump has predicted this 39 times. So we'll have to adjust that saying. 39 times is the charm.
Yeah, no, to be honest, when he first mentioned it, I didn't think twice. I just assumed there was more nonsense. But when the Iranians confirmed on their side, then again, at some point it would have to be the real deal. So let's hope this is it. And thank you very much for taking the time. And where are you, by the way? You're
New York City, celebrating it's Russia's day.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, we spoke earlier about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was invited up to attend, and I'm gonna go to the UN mission, their UN mission here in a bit. So,
yeah, I just read in the Ukrainian media that Marco Rubio wished Happy Russia Day to the Russian people. So it's This shouldn't be newsworthy, but in these days it is.
Yeah, step in the right direction anyway.
Yeah.
But keep doing your good work, Glenn. You got to keep people informed, and they watch you. And because this, just tell everybody, you ought to start actually sell Glenn Deason neck braces. You know, if you're going to follow these politics, you got to have this neck brace to support yourself, so you don't get whiplash.
Well, thanks again, Larry.
All right, my friend.